Okay, so welcome to the next Workdesk session here. My name is Christian Finzel. I'm working for the Workdesk team as a consultant, and this talk today is together with Richard McKnight. He's also working for the consulting department. He's a technical consulting guy, and we will have a talk today about building a quick solution with Alfresco Workdesk. So what's our message, our mission for today? We want to show you how to combine the benefits of Alfresco Workdesk and the Alfresco Workdesk and create a smart and simple solution. I think most of you are familiar with Alfresco Repository, but Alfresco Workdesk might be new for you or for some of you. So Workdesk is a new application. It's available on top of Alfresco Repository, and it's another option for Share. So Share is really good in collaboration stuff, and Workdesk focuses on more structured information processes, document-oriented processes. And yeah, we will show you how Workdesk looks like and how you can, as we said, combine the benefits of the repository and the benefits of Workdesk and create a simple and smart solution. This talk is also based on a demo. I would like to give you a short background of this demo. Let's assume we are an HR department, human resources department, and the users of that department, they have to administrate and manage the documents that belong to our employees. So let's assume we are a big company, hundreds and thousands of employees, and yes, we have to manage this information, for example, any sick certificates, application papers, contracts, and things like that. And we will show you today how to create such an application based on Alfresco Repository and Alfresco Workdesk, and show you how to create this simple and smart solution. And as I told you, it's based on an human resources example, but this can also be applied to any other example. So if you have a requirement for claim handling or for contract management, things like that, the idea is always the same. You can convert this demo, this example, to any other use case, so it might be helpful for you in your internal projects or projects for your customers. So we will have two different groups in our human resources department, and those groups will have also different tasks. And these tasks are the basic requirements for such a solution. End user, he wants to get the information that he needs for his daily work as simple, as fast as possible, and therefore we show a way how to search for existing documents in our repository, how to search for e-files. E-file is a term, I will explain it later. It's more or less a collection of documents that belong together. And we will see, to have the complete view of this application, we see how to create such a new e-file, how to change such an e-file, and how to add new content to that e-file. So it's more or less the complete use case of an end user of such a human resources department. They must be able to find the information that they need. They must be able to modify the information that they need for the daily work. And of course, they have to be able to add new content to the repository, and again, in a simple and smart way. And that's our mission for today. That's what we would like to show to you, how to achieve these tasks here. Searching for the documents, searching for e-files, and how to change and modify this information. Another requirement that you might know from your existing projects, from your experience, we know it from our consulting experience, it's always necessary in a project to provide the information, only the information that a user needs for his work. Don't show too many functionalities, too many options. This might be confusing to the user. We want to keep it as simple and as easy as possible. And therefore, we use some customized business views. So the members of the human resources and the members of the pension force, these are our two groups. They should get different views. They should only get what they need for their daily work. Yeah, and let's start with the first use case. As I told you, it's a basic requirement for such an application. A user must be able to search for the content that he needs. In this case, he must be able to find the documents and the e-files that are available in his repository. And this human resources example is based on our own data model. We provided some data models, some additional properties, just to make it easier to provide additional metadata and to make it easier to structure the information in our repository. That you do not only have 2 or 3 properties, you have a bigger set of properties, and this will help you in the long term to keep your repository structured and to work with the information, with the documents and the e-files in your repository. Okay, as I told you, that's the first task. I will show you a basic example how to create such a new search template, how such a search template looks like, how to make it available in the application, and yes, how it's working. So a search template is basically an XML file, an XML template. This template consists of some parts. It's similar to an SQL query. So I've shown it here on this picture. The first part is this select statement. This is more or less, here you can define which columns should be available on your result list. So that's one configuration option. And the important part, of course, is this where section, where you can define some search criteria that should make it easier for the user to find the information that he needs. These search criteria can be used with any operators like a like search, an equal search, between, greater than, less than. You can use full text search and things like that. And one additional feature here is this last one here. It might be a little bit small for the last rows. It's called subclasses. So we can really decide that only a specific document type or a specific folder type should be returned by our search. Again, this specific folder or document type, of course, it fits to our use case. So when a user executes the search, he should only get documents or e-files that match to our use case, that match to our human resources example. Okay, so yeah, we talked about it. Let's have a look how it looks like and how it's working. I will switch to my virtual machine. And yeah, that's Alfresco Workdesk. Basically, you get this login screen here. You can also configure it with a single sign-on in your project if you want to have it. Here we will just log in with a HRU user, means human resources user. And when we log in, we get a first impression of Workdesk. You see some functionalities. We call them master plugins on top. These master plugins are more or less a big picture of what you can expect, like search or like browsing or like workflow or my settings. And you see the search master plugin is selected, but we don't see any search templates yet. That's my next task right now. So we will add 2 search templates here. We will have a look at the search template, how it looks like, and then we will make it available, and then we can execute our first search here. I've prepared 2 search templates, and I will just put them into our deployment. By the way, this Workdesk is deployed on the Tomcat. It's the same Tomcat as Alfresco. So I just paste these 2 search templates, these 2 XML files, into our deployment, into a specific path. And we can also have a look at the first example, at the find documents example. And as I told you, we can define some properties here in the select part. These properties will act as columns in our result list. And here in this example, I added some search criteria. For example, for the personal number, that's one property of our custom data model, or the theme is document, theme is name, and some other properties. So that's the XML file. This XML file describes our search, and we have pasted these two search templates into our deployment. And after the next login, we should get the search templates. You see, we're again in the search master plugin. Now I get two search templates on the left side. Find HR documents is a search that will return all the documents from the HR document content model that fit to my search criteria. So I can, of course, execute an empty search, returns all the documents, or, of course, I can enter some property values, like, for example, the personal number should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can execute the search, and I only get the documents that fit to my search criteria. And as I told you, we want to make it as smart and as simple as possible for the users. And there's one nice feature. So let's assume an end user, he has to execute the same search each morning, each week, or 5 times a day, I don't know. So each user can save the search, and it will be available for this specific user. So you can provide any name. In this case, search for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can click on save. And now, I can reset it here. So now I have an empty search template. And the user can now just select from the drop-down menu. And these searches are available to this specific user. So I can now select search for 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. You see it's pre-selected, pre-filled, and the user can execute the search. Okay, the second example here is the find HR dossier or find e-file search template. It's again similar. You can provide some search criteria, some operators, and when you execute a search, you get a different result. In this case, you get these so-called e-files. And yeah, that's the next part of our talk today. The first use case was about searching for documents, and this one here was now searching for so-called e-files. And let's jump back to our presentation, because such an e-file structure is our next slide. When we are talking about such an e-file structure, then it's again something that should make it easier for the end user. We define such an e-file as a collection of documents that belong together. In our case, in our human resources example, such a collection of documents that belong together are, of course, the documents that belong to one employee. So that's, in our case, that's the e-file, or the documents that belong to John Doe, Michael Miller, or whatever. They should be available in this e-file view, and we want to show this information in a structured way, again, to make it easy for the user. And such an e-file view might look like this one here. So we will see it later in the live demo. On top, we have this e-file summary. It should just show some metadata of that e-file. The user can also configure this metadata, so each user can configure it for himself. It's easy for him because he gets the personal number, in this case, last name, first name. It will be available. He doesn't have to execute another click or jump into another dialog. It's available, and this is helpful for his daily work. Then the e-file itself, in our case, consists of a physical part and a virtual part. This is one option. We have different kinds of e-files. This one is one option because it combines a physical folder in share and the content, and the subfolder structure here is virtual. So it's more or less, it's just a search template definition. And it's a more flexible solution. It's really powerful because you can structure your information here depending on your metadata values. Again, that's an example how important the metadata values are. And you can also change the structure here just by changing the XML template. This affects all existing e-files. Imagine you would work with physical subfolders. You have 10,000 of employees, and you would have to change it, the physical folder names. That's a bigger effort. Here you change the XML template, and it is effective for all the existing e-files. To set up such an e-file structure, you have to do some steps. The most important step is this one here. You need an XML template, again, a search based on XML files. And this template consists of a search definition and of the nodes that we've seen on the previous slide here. So these nodes here are defined in our XML template. And the XML template looks like this. So you have a node, and below that node, you have the search criteria definition. So when a user clicks on the node with the display name terms of employment, a search will be executed, and it returns all the documents where the metadata document type has the value terms of employment. It's a simple solution, but the simple solutions are most of the time are the best solutions. It's a simple solution. It can be extended. You can, of course, use additional search criteria here. So, for example, the second example is called name equals renumeration. If you add a second search criteria here with the status equals new, then it would be something like new renumerations. So it's a powerful solution. And yeah, let's have a look at it in our VM, how it looks like. So let's switch back to the VM. Yeah, and yeah, that's where we stopped our demo. I executed the search for find HR dossiers or e-files, and it returned all the existing e-files in our repository. I can simply click on one of our e-files here. You see we jump into this HR dossier e-file, and that's what I told you. Can you see it? That's what I told you. You get this view. You have the e-file summary. Here on the left side, you have this physical folder, that also exists in share, and the virtual subfolder structure that allows you this structured views depending on metadata. And for example, if I click here on the renumeration, as I told you, it just executes a search and returns the document that fit to my search criteria. And our experience is that the end users, they are more familiar with such a subfolder structure. So they don't care about if it's a search or if these are physical folders. Their message is they want to get the information that they need as easy, as fast as possible. And that's one approach. This fits to many use cases. And as I told you, it's based on an HR example. You can convert it to any other use case in your projects. Okay, so we were able to search for documents. We were able to search for these so-called e-files. These are the first tasks we had to cover. And of course, one of our use cases is to add a new instance of such an e-file. So let's assume a new employee comes to our company, he gets hired, and yes, we have to create, as human resources department, we have to create a new e-file for this employee, and therefore we provide such a so-called, again, a plugin. It's called an e-file plugin, and it will just provide an icon to the user. He can click on that icon, a new form gets opened, and he can enter some some metadata values. And this can all be done in the so-called Alfresco Workdesk configurator tool. So you don't have to hack any XML files. It's a UI interface. It's an Eclipse plugin that can be used, and we will see that later. So just keep in mind, when you create such a plugin, you don't have to hack an XML file. It's possible in our configurator tool. It's a UI tool. Yeah, and when we create such a e-file, we, for example, want to do some additional configuration, again, to make it easier for the user. So, for example, the folder type should be pre-configured. I told you we are working with a custom data model here, and the user, he doesn't have, or he should not select from all available folder types. It should be pre-selected, and that's, for example, possible. Or some properties should be automatically filled or validated, or if it has to be saved in a specific folder location. This can also be configured in Workdesk. And as our talk today is called Combine the Benefits of Alfresco Repository and Alfresco Workdesk and create such a solution, we also have some additional features on the repo side, and that is something that Rich is going to explain you now.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, one of the things that when I met Christian when I was taking a Workdesk course, and I said, my goodness, this is a nice front end, and we started talking about what could be done on the back end to support what's in the front end. And so what we've done here is we've provided an extension, an Alfresco module, that actually supports a number of features that enhance what's done on the front end. As part of this thing, so we've created an AMP file. We also have another package that's been developed over a number of different engagements that provide some core functions that engagement after engagement we use. So it's a consulting package, and we have that as part of it. And then we also leverage some services in here to, for some of these called the attribute service. All of the things that I'm going to talk about are in the source code that we've uploaded, and you'll be able to look at it. The things that we do to actually support this are done in a couple of ways. Some of the things that we do are actually done at Bootstrap. So when you first install the module that supports this, there's certain things that it does to the repository to ensure that the things that you need are in the repository and ready to go. The second thing, so that's what some of the things do. There are other things that we do that are done when you create an e-file. And to do that, we use something called a content policy that gets fired on different events that might occur. And the one that we use for the most part is the onCreate node content policy. You don't have to look at the slides today. These are nice cartoons for you to look at later that talk about scenarios that might support these use cases. And I also have the bullet points in the slides. But one of the things that we do automatically is automatically create the top level folder. So all of the dossiers for the HR portion of the application live in a folder called HR dossiers. Workdesk doesn't have a way to actually automatically create that. And as part of the initialization of the repository, what we're able to do is set it up so that during the bootstrapping portion, when this module is first put into first installed, it actually looks at the repository and looks to see what things are there that it needs to support this application. And if it's not there, it goes ahead and creates it. The other thing that we do is support is enforce uniqueness on the employee number. That's not something that comes out of the box with our content modeling per se, but there's something called the attribute service that we use that's really just a key value pair that we can put in the repository and just map things together. And so we say, look, I have this employee ID. It points to this node ref. If I ever try to add that employee ID and point to another node ref, it says, that's a duplicate key, and it rejects it. So this keeps you from having bad data because you've violated the unique key. It's something that I've seen people do on occasion where they search for it, via Solr or Lucene, and do a number of different things to do it. The problem with that is when you run into issues of eventual consistency and things like that, you might not catch it. So this enforces it in a much more declarative way. The other thing that we've done, and here we took a page out of what Share does. You notice in Share, you have contributors, you have coordinators, you have managers for each site. Well, what they do is they do something called role-based access control. And for each site, they actually create a set of groups, and they give each of those groups certain access to the content in the site. And then in order to give somebody a role in the site, you just add them to that group. Well, much in the same way, we've done this with the e-files. So let's say, for instance, you have an e-file on an employee, and only HR really has access to it, but you want to give their supervisor access to it to look at it. You can add their supervisor to the consumer group for that particular e-file, and then they'd be able to go and look through that. And so that's one way that you can actually do that. But in order to do that, part of what you have to do is you have to go ahead and, when you create the e-file, you then have to also create these groups. The other thing that you need to do when you do this is you need to make sure that these groups that are there to support role-based access control don't show up every time you look for just arbitrary groups within the repository. So what we do is they get stashed away in zones and hidden away, so that if you're looking at just, I want a list of groups in the repository, these groups become system groups and they're hidden away. If you want to see them, then you can say show system groups, and then you show the list of those. The other thing that we've done is we added a draft folder when we create the e-file. Again, this is something that we do with a content policy. So we have all of the virtual folders that we've added, but then we also add a physical draft folder, and that can be used to add content that's not ready for prime time. You can even put access control on it so that it's really, so that it's only seen, content there is only seen by the owner and not necessarily visible to everybody. The other thing that we do is we automatically name the e-file. If you can imagine, if you give everybody the ability to name their own e-file, some users might say, okay, I'm just going to use the first name and last name. That might not work so well when you have John Smith. Other people might say, let me use the employee ID only. And so, you might not have a standard. And you could publish a standard and say, everybody creating an e-file will do X, Y, Z. How many people always follow instructions here? So one of the things that we do is we actually, when the e-file is created, we go ahead and we take the name property and we actually set it based on metadata that's in the that's presented, and we use the employee ID, the first name, and the last name. And this is similar to what happens when you do the home folder provider. So, you create a home folder for a user. There's actually some code that says, what am I going to name that file? The code that does that also says, where am I going to place this file? And so one of the things that we've done here is, if you remember, for those of you who have done applications, that Alfresco doesn't really like to have 25,000, folders as a subfolder of one particular folder. And given the fact that we have a 6-digit employee number, you could have 1 million employees if you wanted to. And when you hit that folder and try to list out all the children in there, that would be a disaster. So the other thing that we do is we create a folder hierarchy as part of the process. And so, for instance, if my employee number was 111111, it would create a folder called 111, and then under that, it would create, my eFile folder. And so that allows us to kind of separate out the eFiles so that they don't show up and cause performance problems. The last thing that we've done is we've added the concept of dynamic constraints. So with dynamic constraints, what you can do is rather than making a list constraint in your content model, you can actually say, you know what, I don't know what my constraints are going to be, or I might know what my constraints are day one, but then as time goes on, you might need to add more constraints. Where this really shows up is when you talk about things like the skills. So, today, you might have a set of skills, and then maybe, tomorrow somebody says, you know what, we got this COBOL problem that we really want to program that we really want to refactor and convert into something else. We need to find somebody with COBOL skills. You don't have that on your list. You got to go and add it to your list, and this allows you to add it to the list dynamically and not have to redo the content model, rebuild your AMP file, redeploy your AMP file, restart the server, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now that brings up a very interesting problem. One of the things that Workdesk does is they actually leverage a feature in CMIS where properties that have the list constraint will expose that list of properties as choices. And so when you see the pull downs that are generated, it's using a CMIS call, getting the choices, and generating the list. The Open CMIS service provider interface does not know how to do that for properties that have dynamic constraints. So what we've actually done is we put a web script in there that knows how to list out the values of the dynamic constraint, and then Christian developed a widget that actually knows how to read that, read the output of that web script and actually display it.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example for combining the benefits of the backend and the front end, using these dynamic constraints and extending it in Workdesk and make it available. Yeah, so we were talking about adding an eFile plugin and talking about these additional features on the repo side, and now, of course, let's test it. So let's have a look at Workdesk, at our VM. You know this screen here, it's an existing eFile, and I told you one common requirement is, of course, to add an additional user to our repository. And I told you it's just a simple click, it opens such a form. It's, again, just one example. You can customize it, you can show it in a different way. Let's just test it. We enter one value here. We select one of our personal numbers. Again, that's such a kind of a sunny days example. We get a choice list here. Of course, there are other ways. You can retrieve the personal number from a database. We have implementations for that. It's an out-of-the-box feature. So there are always many ways to achieve it, to realize a use case. In this case, in this example here, we just use the simple constraint list and combining it with the feature from Rich, from backend, to just ensure that it's a unique ID. So in this case, we selected a personal number from the drop-down menu. We add some names, can select some additional properties and save it. And yeah, that's what Rich mentioned before, to create unique folder names. It's the combination of the personal number and of the first name and last name. Again, just one example. There might be other approaches, other use cases where you need it in a different way. It's an example, it's possible. It's an example how to combine these advantages of backend and frontend and use it together in this smart application. Or, for example, if we want to test the uniqueness. So again, somebody wants to create a new eFile, and again, he selects 55555. In this case, if he wants to save, he gets an error message. Okay, we didn't have enough time to show a nicely formatted error message. It's working.
It does say on create node policy, so it specifically says, hey, wait a minute, you can't do, so it captures it. We didn't have a way to actually make it a nice error message at this point.
And as soon as you select another personal number, it's working as expected. So again, one idea of using this uniqueness of the backend feature to check if this personal number has already been used. And again, just an example, can be used in different ways. Another one, I will open this one again, is Rich was talking about if you need an expert or anything like this, we want to search for an expert. And we have a list of possible values. So it might be an expert in database administration or whatever. And then we get this new requirement and we need a different expert. And again, that's one example how we can leverage the advantages of the backend system. So we can add an additional value to this list. This value should be JCL. So you see the list does not contain this value yet. And let's test it. Let's add an additional value. Here in this JavaScript console, let's paste it here. Let's execute it, and let's try it again. So we open a new Efile, and you see now we have this JCL entry. So again, it makes you more flexible. You don't rely on the information that might have been stored in the data model. You can really extend it. You can extend both applications, Workdesk and the repository, and use the benefits of both sides. Yeah, so that was one example how to create an e-file if we get a new employee into our company. Other use cases might be to add documents to that new e-file, because of course we have to add a certificate if our employee is sick or something like this. We might to manage this information somewhere. And again, it's just one click. You can either select it from your local machine, or you can just drag and drop it. And you see here the information gets pre-filled because we're in the personal number 567890. The type was sick certificate. Again, to make it easier for the user. We can select this sector and subsector. You see dependent choice lists, again, values that come from an external database. And as soon as we click on save, we have the document in our repository with all the metadata that we need. And of course, we can still change this information. We can change the properties. And of course, we can also change the metadata of our e-file itself. So we have access to all the information. And that was too fast, sorry. You can also decide some properties should be read-only, some should be editable. Of course, we might not want to have them to change the personal number. We made a lot of effort to make it unique, and then somebody wants to change it. So you can decide for each property, should it be editable, should it be read-only, or should it be hidden, for example. So that's all possible by configuration. And and for example here, the other feature from Rich, when we create this e-file, we also get this physical folder. In our example, it's this draft folder. All the folders above are searches, are part of our virtual template definition. And we added this additional draft folder. Again, might be one idea. There are other use cases. For example, if you want to have different folders depending on the access rights, if it should be a manager or end user. So a lot of things are possible. That was just one idea how it might look like. So, yeah, sure. In the VM?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of other things that we mentioned that I just wanted to make sure you're aware of. And let's go back to the repository. So the other thing that we talked about was the fact that, so you have this in HR dossiers. Now I can't really prove to you that this was automatically created. You'll just have to trust me on this one. But if you look here, you'll notice that when we talked about creating the folder structure, that we've actually done that. So you can see how this folder structure has been created in the repository. And then the one last thing that I would like to show you is that if we go to the groups and we browse the groups, you'll notice, so here are our normal groups. If I go now and say show system groups and click browse again, you'll notice that we've created groups for each of the e-files. So.
Okay, so yeah, that was now the complete use case of finding documents, finding e-files, working with e-files, adding new e-files, adding new content, changing new content. So that's more or less for an end user, that's what he needs for his daily work, and we have covered this. One missing thing from my first 2 slides where I talked about the tasks for today, and you know it from your projects. When you create such an application for end users, for example, this human resources example, and you have different groups, people with different tasks, you want to ensure that each user, he gets only the plugins, the functionalities that he needs for his work. They shouldn't see too much information, too many plugins. They should get what they need for the daily work. And that's what we call business views in Alfresco Workdesk. So you can define for each user group which plugin, which search template should be available for this group. That's powerful, and I think that's a mandatory requirement for most of your projects. You might have big projects, and the users should only get what they need. They shouldn't get too much information. This might be, of course, confusing for them. And yeah, that's what I would like to show to you right now, how to set up such a business view in Workdesk and how it looks like. So I've prepared one configuration file. It's the file OW bootstrap XML file where we define all the connection to the repository and define some basic features like our role management. So I will just copy this one, paste it into our deployment, reload the configuration, and test it. Okay, so it's in our deployment now, and again, one advantage of Workdesk, some specific users can reload configuration files. You don't have to restart Tomcat, you can reload them on the fly. So we provide 2 buttons here. I will reload the bootstrap configuration, and now the role management is active. And when I log in now, you see some plugins will be gone, and depending on my user group. So let's test it. Let's log out and let's log in as human resources user again. You see it's a limited number of master plugins on top. He gets two search templates. And if I log in with a different user, that was a user from our pension fund group, you see he only gets 2 plugins. Basic example, basic use case, but it's mandatory in projects. And it's all based on the groups of Alfresco Share, so you can reuse the groups in Alfresco Share. And based on these groups, you can set up such a business view in Workdesk. And sometimes there's a confusion of what is business view or what is permission. And I think it's easy to remember the business views, what the user can see and which functionalities should be available. They are configured in Workdesk. And the permissions, if I should be able to see a document, an e-file, an object in general, is defined in the backend system in the repository. And that's also what we saw here. You can create groups, you can assign groups, you can give them access rights to specific e-files or folders. Yeah, and that's what we wanted to show you again. You can combine the repository, you can combine Workdesk, and this gives you the ability to create a simple, a smart solution, powerful solution that fits to your requirements and projects. Thanks for that. Are there any questions left for Rich or me?
I've checked the documentation, and there is a Workdesk for community and Workdesk Enterprise.
Yeah.
And the functionality we're talking about is in both versions, or it's only in the Enterprise version?
Which one?
Or the functionality.
So, for example,
what's the difference between the community and Enterprise?
Yeah. There are some differences. So some functionality is not available, and one example are these business views. So this so-called role manager, DB role manager, is not available in the community version. It's only in the enterprise version.
On the repo side, everything is available.
Okay.
Hi, Rich. Question for you around the dynamic constraints. I saw the user interface for editing those was the JavaScript console. Has there been any consideration maybe doing that through data lists?
I did not do it with data lists. That's not to say it couldn't be done with data lists. I'd have to have that conversation. I mean, the way we've done the dynamic constraints, I've done it a number of different ways. Data lists would be one way to do it. We actually stored these values using the attribute service, and that seemed to be the lightest weight way of doing it. So we're not actually creating content, but we're just adding, name value pairs. And regarding the UI, for this use case, we just decided to we had the JavaScript API that we added to it. From that we could add a web script and then add something on the even on the Workdesk side that could actually leverage that web script.
More questions?
Okay, so thanks again.
Thank you.